USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. I decided to come to you this morning before I mowed the lawn, so even though I'm unshaved, I'm unsweaty, and always fueled by coffee, organic, tasty stuff. Pull up a chair, enjoy yourself. We're going to start with where we were yesterday about the Washington Post and about media bias in general. We're going to feature the Rolling Stone magazine. We're going to feature Jimmy Dore, and Aaron Mate is coming up in a future show. But I want to mention him in the same breath as Jimmy Dore because he's like Crystal Ball is really coming on. I want to remind you of what I said in this past week, that this show is a way to get around the media blockade in place and held up by institutions such as the Washington Post, which is funded by Jeff Bezos, basically big money. So I want to keep reminding us what we can do to get around the media blockade, and I want to also remind us if voting is going to do any good, how it can do some good. We're going to end with Victor Tiffany of Revolt against Plutocracy. So let's get rolling. Let's start here where we ended yesterday. I was having a conversation about how we can hold the Washington Post accountable. And I explained yesterday that the Washington Post is just one organ of a larger body. I said it was one tentacle, maybe two or three, of an octopus that's trying to strangle us. I think I said it even better just then than I did yesterday, so you might want to write that down. And what's going on is all the tentacles are working together because they're all part of the same octopus. And we had a quote from a brilliant article by Thomas Frank showing how the Washington Post is doing that part of it. And then we ended with this idea that Bernie or bust, the leverage movement of revolt against plutocracy. Look at the picture right below my picture here. You can get leverage over the process without turning cars over in violent protests or going on massive job strikes or whatever else it takes to get people's attention. This voter leverage is a peaceful revolution, nonviolent revolution, even though the people in power won't look at it that way. I think they're terrified. So I said yesterday, this is where Bernie or bust comes in. If regular people hear about the controversy swirling around our movement, their fear of Donald Trump may circumvent all of the strident efforts of the Washington Post and others to keep the current rulers in power. Now I'm going to jump to Rolling Stone. This is a great channel. This is Matt Taibbi, and he is wonderful. Katie, I can't remember Katie's last name, but she's very good. She's got this cynicism going and this snarkiness going, and I didn't know her very much until I was watching this clip, but I recommend both of them very highly. And they write good articles too. I've seen their names on articles, at least Matt's. And so I'm pleased to introduce you to this outlet.
CNN. The Washington Post is pushing back at criticism from Senator Bernie Sanders. The 2020 Democratic hopeful blasted the Post coverage of his campaign, and he argues that it is biased because it is owned by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. Listen to Sanders in New Hampshire yesterday.
Anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? Yeah. See, and I talk about that all of the time, and then I wonder why the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, doesn't write particularly good articles about me. I don't know why.
And
he failed.
They're laughing because it's so obvious. And then look how the Washington Post comes back at that.
Provide any evidence of that. Those past comments along those lines were echoed.
No evidence. She's reading the teleprompter. She's like, and I said the Washington Post comes back at it. CNN comes back at it. But CNN is just part of the same octopus too. And I mean, her face, it just looks so crooked. She's saying this stuff that just obviously she's just part of this cancerous oligarchy, she's just saying what they tell her to say. She's like a puppet. You can almost see the invisible hand pulling her strings.
Code by his campaign, and prompted this reply by Marty Barron, the executive editor for the Washington Post. Quote, Senator Sanders is a member of a large club of politicians of every ideology who complain about their coverage, contrary to the conspiracy theory that the senator seems to favor. Jeff Bezos allows our newsroom to operate with full independence, as our reporters and editors can attest.
From the Marty Barron.
I can't. That kills me. That
he
part.
was played by Lieb Schreiber in Spotlight. How can we criticize him?
I do like Schreiber, but that is the most ridiculous thing.
And when you're going against such a standard like the Washington Post, which has come out and said from Marty Barron himself that you are perpetuating a conspiracy that sounds just like the President of the United States.
You're like, it's such a conspiracy that even the publisher...
I mean, it's preposterous. If somebody said, if you worked for Fox News, nobody's going to say anything bad about Rupert Murdoch. There isn't a single... Democrat or progressive in the world who would argue with that. It's a self-evident statement, and everybody knows that that's how it works in this. Nobody comes down and red pencils your copy,
which we'll talk about. But I mean, on top of that, imagine if your defense of that was like, even Rupert Murdoch said it's not true. Like, why does she think this is a good argument? It's the exact opposite of a good argument. It's like, that's the last person you quote. You'd say even this objective person who has nothing to do with this, or even this person who loves Sanders, or even this person who hates the Washington Post. But no.
If you're going to make that accusation, you better be able to offer some proof. Otherwise, you are acting just like Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
the Trump thing, if you criticize the media, you're Trump. That's a faulty syllogism. Like, you ever heard the Woody Allen joke, like, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore all men are Socrates? That's exactly what they're doing. Donald Trump criticizes the media, Bernie Sanders, therefore Bernie Sanders is Donald. It doesn't work that way. Like, just because Donald Trump does something doesn't make all criticism of the media invalid.
It doesn't make it Trumpian, per se. And also, look what the way they're criticizing.
That point is important. He throws it off like nothing, but that was brilliant. And Woody Allen, of course, is brilliant. This syllogism, and we're going to need to remember because it was so compact and clean and soundbitey that we can throw that right back at people. Another example is Tulsi Gabbard. People say, well, conservatives like Tulsi Gabbard, therefore Tulsi Gabbard must be evil. And it's the same kind of false reasoning.
It. Like, Sanders isn't saying anything threatening. He's not making fun of journalists for, like, being disabled, right? Like, the fact that you could compare those things. I mean, I remember seeing this a lot in 2016 with TPP. People were like, oh, they both oppose TPP. Like, well, you know who else opposes TPP? The Sierra Club, Doctors Without Borders, Feminist Majority, NOW, all these groups that the liberals who are making that argument claim to support. Like, there is overlap. Politics makes for strange bedfellows. People support things for different reasons. And is Noam Chomsky Trumpian with all of his critique of the media? Manufacturing consent. That's like Trump's, Mein Kampf or whatever.
That was brilliant. Noam Chomsky has criticized the media from the beginning. Some of his best early clips were about the media and how they're biased. He goes right to Dan Rather and he shows how Dan Rather is biased. So is he Trumpian? Brilliant.
And the thing about this, and I think Jimmy is going to get into this a little bit too. The whole issue when they get up there and they say, oh, who owns the newspaper doesn't have any impact on our coverage, or who advertises on our channel doesn't have any impact on how we cover things. Everybody knows that's bullshit. Right. Look, I've worked for news organizations that have come up against the problem of criticizing an advertiser before. Right. Like, it comes up, and beyond that, on an unconscious level, that's where it works. It works at the point of hire. You know that if you start being a jerk about certain things, you're not going to get promoted in this company.
And you wouldn't have been hired in the first place, right? And then
that's exactly what Crystal Ball said. They're pretty much directly quoting what she said and what her co-host said. Can't remember his name right now.
Exactly.
Get there, it's not all overt,
and that's why people like Jennifer Rubin and Max Boot rise to the op-ed page, and and the Glenn Kesslers of the world will do fine. The point is, denying all this just completely undermines the credibility of
Right.
the press with huge swaths of the public, left and right.
Wow, wow, Matt, you sound like Trump.
Exactly.
Wow, saying that
yeah.
there's, and the same people who are making this point are like people who just accuse the press of being biased against Hillary Clinton.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's all in the eye of the beholder,
Right.
right? I mean, like, bias exists everywhere, and it's just a question of, like, how upfront you
Yeah,
are about
exactly.
it.
And it also matters who's paying for it, paying for that bias directly. Let's skip ahead here in their broadcast.
And so it took a while for me to figure out how to do it right and correctly. And that's all started at the UCB Theater when I started doing it. Was a show called Pop and Politics, which led to my hour special on Comedy Central, which was called Citizen Jimmy. And that led to me then getting on the Young Turks, which then led to the Jimmy Dore Show.
What was the first material that you were doing?
From what I remember, it was just about the ridiculousness of the news going along with the Iraq War and stuff like that. So now people pretty much get it. But still, people turn to MSNBC as like it's some kind of alternative news programming instead of being produced by the exact same people that they're supposed to be. That's the theme of my show, is that the problem with the news is that they're owned and funded by the people they're supposed to be investigating and exposing. And of course, you're not going to get the news that you need to know about from those people, which is why we're in a...
And that's why I started this show. That's why he started the Jimmy Dore Show. You're not going to get the news by watching the news. You've got to go around the blockade. And so I'd say the main thrust of the Bernie or Bust show is to get you exposure to the people like Jimmy who aren't ever going to be featured on MSNBC.
Wars that nobody gives a shit about. 80% of the people live paycheck to paycheck. 50% Americans can't afford like a $400 emergency. 30 million Americans don't have health. I mean, that's because the people who bring us the news are all owned by the people who want to keep that status quo. I mean, that's not anything new, but it's for really rare to hear for some reason, even in comedy. You know, right now it's kind of a sad time for comedians because they've been sucked into this Russiagate bullshit. And instead of debunking it and standing up to Red Scares, they play right along with it. Every late night talk show, first of all, there's no even reason for those shows to exist. Who the hell would go home? So I was watching Conan O'Brien the other day, just for not the right reasons.
Right.
And
were you high?
So yes, so they announced Andy Richter's podcast. He has a new podcast. And I was like, wow, maybe they'll talk about something interesting on that podcast, because they never fucking talk about anything interesting on this 22-minute show he does a night, which is why podcasts are big now. Why would you go watch that show when you can watch, someone speak interestingly? Joe Rogan outdoes all of them.
Right.
Joe Rogan, the host of Fear Factor, who announces guys fighting in cages, is a better talk show host than all these millionaire, zillionaire guys.
And also, he and you have more reach now than... Are you amazed? I'm always amazed that people in the business are not aware of how little impact they're having as opposed to what they used to have. Right. I mean, people like you and Joe, you're actually bigger media properties now, really, than a lot of these cable outlets.
Well, it's because they can get something, from us that they can't get anywhere else. People want to have funny, interesting conversations about politics. They turn on Bill Maher. They're getting corporate claptrap. That isn't insightful one bit. That show, So I am.
On a previous show, I've talked about the connection to Hollywood talent agencies, and you can see it in Bill Maher and these other people. He's not coming right out and saying it, but they're also part of the octopus, and he isn't. And Joe Rogan seemingly isn't either. And they have big shows. They have a lot of people watching them, and so hopefully we can all work together and get their message out to you.
I'm surprised when powerful people recognize me publicly, like when Neera Tanden, who's the president of the Center for American Progress,
we're big
Neera fans.
came at me on Twitter. It was like, oh, I thought you were going to pretend to not notice me your whole life, but it's bothering her so much that I outed her for the fascist war criminal that she really is, because she got revealed by WikiLeaks that she wanted to steal the oil in Libya. She was advocating for stealing their oil so we could fund more interventionist wars.
This is really important. And how many people, raise your hand if you've ever heard this about Neera Tanden before. I have, but I'd say that the average American is never going to hear this unless we can get people to come around and watch Jimmy Dore more often. And Rolling Stone, I'm so proud of them. I didn't know enough about them. I heard Matt Taibbi's name before, but he's the real thing.
Because if we don't, we're going to have to cut social programs at home, and that would piss people off. So in order to keep being able to do these foreign wars, we better start stealing their oil. That was Neera Tanden revealed by Julian Assange, and now she's advocating for his imprisonment and death, right? And so I just called out, no, you're the real fascist. So the fact that I do a video that she watches and then she actually tweets about it, it's like, oh my God.
Thanks for the PR.
I'm a drunk nightclub comedian who smokes pot in the morning in my garage, and it's bothering these people. Why? Because there is no adversarial journalism in this goddamn country, and it's up to people like me. And that's why our country's in such a bad shape when it lands on the shoulders of people like me to be the anti-war voice. You know, it's we're in a.
Let's keep watching him too, and supporting him. Give him your money. Give him your eyeballs. Give him your attention, because he's going to save us. People like him are going to save us if we're going to be saved. Now, let's go on to revolutionary voting versus protest voting and including voting for the lesser evil or just giving up entirely. I'm going to link to this clip, and I'm not showing all of it right now, but if you want to understand those 4 things well, definitely watch this whole clip. I just want to show you this part of it.
Revolutionary vote is voting for a third-party candidate, voting for a progressive as a legitimate candidate. That might be Green Party.
So he's saying what the Democrat people who run Bernie groups, they'll kick you out. How do I know this? They'll kick you out of Facebook groups if you advocate voting Green Party. They want to keep all the sheep in the Democratic fold no matter what, even if Bernie doesn't get the nomination. And that's not playing out very well. I'm starting to infiltrate those groups. I'm getting messages into those groups. I won't reveal all my secrets, but I still know what's going on in those groups. And I know that they're terrified of Bernie or bust. And they're terrified of people voting third party, not because it will do no good. It's because it will not keep the blue team in power. And the blue team, let's just be honest here, and Victor Tiffany here will admit this, the blue team is just as corporate as the red team, if not more so. So I'll let him go on here. He's got some more good points.
Party this time, that might be Socialist Party, maybe Justice Party, any progressive third-party candidate. That's the or bust option of 2020. And we changed it this time because we wanted to do something smarter. We don't want to protest. This isn't about a protest movement. You can protest 365 days a year. You get to vote, cast a revolutionary vote once every 4 years. Right. Let's not waste it. The other 2 votes are, of course, lesser evil. There was 10% of Bernie or busters who we polled who voted for Hillary Clinton. They were voting for the lesser of 2 evils, they thought. In our opinion, they voted for the greater of 2, quote-unquote, evils, the greater of 2 very dangerous candidates. At any rate, Bernie or bust is a rebellion and an electoral revolt against voting for evil. All Bernie or bust is on this time around is voting on November 3rd for a progressive candidate. That's it. You're going to vote your conscience. You're not going to vote for the lesser of 2 evils.
Exactly. Hold that thought, because people will try to confuse you. And all that confusion, I think, originates with Neera Tanden and John Cowan and David Brock, all of the, and you'll have to watch previous Bernie or Bust shows if you want to know more about who they are. But you'll find that they're just trying to confuse us, and they throw out these little slogan things, and then we bite and we believe, oh, we're just voting for Trump if we vote third party. What you're doing is you're voting for someone who's actually a good candidate. So never let anyone tell you. People really close to me have told me, oh, Dad, you just voted for Trump, and it's not true. We need to hold on to the idea that we need to vote for somebody that we really believe in. And that's where Bernie or bust comes in, because if we don't get Bernie in, We can't keep perpetuating evil. I'll leave you with that thought. I'm going to link to all this stuff underneath, so please. Oh, also subscribe to the Bernie or Bust Show and hit the like button. I never remember to say that stuff. I'm not that smooth yet, but please do that. And I'll see you tomorrow.